Welcome to Behind the Play, a video and podcast product of The Hoop Show that explores the lives of Geelong players past and present, as well as the off-field figures that are keeping us Geelong strong. My name is Paul James, and today I have the great pleasure to introduce someone and speak to someone who I got to spend watching on my TV a lot when I was younger, really dominating for the Cats. Mr. Barry Stoneham, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Great to be on.
It's going to be an awesome chat. I've been, as I kind of prefaced there, I spent a lot of time watching you when I was younger on the screen there, really carving it up for the Cats, doing a fantastic job, and as a Cats skipper as well, just a fantastic centre half forward over the years, and yeah, really looking forward to pick through that career with you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so am I. It sort of feels like it's 50 years ago. It's not that far away, to be honest, but I retired like 23 years ago. But gee, it feels like a lifetime. But had some great times, great memories. And still obviously watch the Cats very closely and really be involved here and there. So yeah, it's great years, but gee, they're a long time ago now.
So before we even get to the years actually playing in the AFL with the Cats, I mean, where did the love affair with footy start? Was it from almost day one? I know you were kind of like, you were brought up in the area. You were, as far as I know, you were kind of a stone's throw away from Cardinia Park, really.
That's right. Look, it was more or less just as a really young boy, to be honest with you. I went to school in Geelong, born and bred in Geelong.
That was St. Joey's, right?
Yeah, St. Joey's from grade 3 back then. So grade 3 is not around anymore at St. Joey's, but grade 3 through to year 12. So back in those days, I mean, all boys school, footy, cricket, athletics, morning, noon, and night, basically.
Kitchen sink it.
Exactly, and just loved it. Loved playing with my mates at the local school, but also a local footy club.
Yep.
So it was just more or less one of those things, and also, again, being a Geelong person and following Geelong closely as a spectator and as a young supporter. We used to go down with the family to Cardinia Park back in the 70s and 80s to watch Geelong, watch a bit of training when we could. And I was at Landy Field as an athlete in athletics years before, and a few of those guys played at Geelong, Andrew Bewes and a few others. So just a sort of connection, and then just loved the game. And I was very lucky. Tim Darcy always said to me, he used to play with, you start out being a supporter of the club, you're lucky enough to play a few games, and when you retire, you become a supporter again. And that's the cycle I've been. It's one of those great things for me to be involved for so long.
Yeah, it's a really special thing to kind of have the Cats there for your entire life. There's people that will be born into the Cats, such as yourself. There's others that find their way across through getting drafted by the Cats and maybe playing their full career there or a large portion of their career there. But yeah, yours is, I mean, it's not a unique story, but it is kind of an uncommon one, really, at the end of the day, to kind of get picked up by the team that you already adored.
Yeah, it is in a way. I suppose back in those days, there was the zones, so there was no draft. That's how far back it was. But the zones, obviously, in Geelong, you go to Geelong, and back in those days, pre-season, they'd invite probably 70 or 80 local players and country players to come in and try out for the club over those weeks of pre-season and summer. Yeah. So again, if you didn't quite make it, you go back to your club and try again the following year. So it was one of those things where you love the club, you grew up watching them, and to be invited down through the under-19 system, scholarship squads and so forth, was a dream come true. And you're right, you said earlier on that we had a few different houses in Geelong at different times, but the main part was probably 1K from the footy club. And when I was playing the first few years, I was actually less than a K away. So I was really very lucky. I mean, again, you look at people go interstate now to different clubs to play. But I wouldn't change it for the world as far as that career and era back in when we played. And
so obviously you were touching on the love of the game in that 70s, that 80s period before you actually got picked up. I mean, who were some of those favourite players for you that you were watching when you were younger?
Yeah, look, I had number 4 about Terry Bright.
Yep.
Back in the early days, and it's quite ironic in a way that I played with Terry when I started playing at Geelong as seniors. So I always loved Terry, jumping Jack Hawkins, Busey, all the players really. It was just one of those things where it was just part of what you do every week. Walk down to Cardinia Park. There was no big grandstands then, but it was a really good environment. Yeah, much simpler. And I think Geelong, the town itself, are very, very fortunate to still have a regional football club in the AFL. I mean, the days of Essendon at Windy Hill and Carlton at Princess Park was great, but Geelong still have that real foundation for a footy club, and the town's very lucky to have that. And those players, I went down, Rod Blake and the Nankervis brothers and all these guys, which are very famous names of the football club. I started playing with those guys for a while, which was quite amazing when you think as a young 18-year-old to come in and play with some of those guys. And Mick Turner,
Yes.
he was a legend of the club. He became Billy Brownless and my manager for a couple of years after he retired. So really good connections with a lot of people.
And I guess it's one of those crazy sort of things that when you, again, this kind of connects to that love of the Cats before you even got picked up, is the fact that, you've been watching these guys for all these years, and then all of a sudden you're walking out onto the field with them, or you're passing it by through the rooms, or whatever the case happens to be. Like, I mean, how did that kind of mess with your head a little bit at first when you first got picked up?
Yeah, it was quite daunting. That's for sure. I was invited down to training during the season. I think I was just turned maybe 17.
Yep.
I've been to Joey's Footy Club in the seniors. We won the premiership in '84. I was invited down in '85 to train, and it was really daunting. I was like a really skinny 80-kilogram, rented a mullet school kid, and you'd walk in pretty shy at the time, and see these superstars you actually used to follow, and they were big grown men, strong. So to go out and train with them, and Jacko was there, I think, at the time.
Yep.
So it was
and he's a madman.
Yeah, really sort of daunting figures, but and it took you a long time to feel comfortable. I stayed there for that year, or second half of the year, and played in the finals and the reserves, and never sort of went back to the local club. So again, it does take you a bit of time to feel comfortable. But when I look back, the guys who I went down and who were the senior players are really good to me. I mean, they welcomed me down, and I think knowing like Busey, for example, from athletics days really helped me as well, just to have a familiar face.
No, that's awesome. And I mean, who'd have thought perhaps when you first walked in the door that 200 plus games later you'd be a captain, you'd play in several grand finals, you'd kick well over 200 goals as well. I mean, could you have pictured anything like that at the beginning?
No, I couldn't have. No, not just saying that, but no, you wouldn't think it. Your dream was to play a game, that's for sure. And for Geelong, the team in Barrack for, so you never thought you'd last 15 years at the club. And again, very fortunate to be the captain for a few years and a few other things along the way.
Kaji.
You look back now and you sort of think, wow. And the main thing was really, and it certainly rings true to this day, is people say it, but the people you meet.
Yes.
And although everyone's gone in different directions, we're getting older, people have got families and work and business. Your teammates and coaching staff and all the staff, whether it be in the office administration or the trainers and so forth, it's just a great community.
Yeah.
And I think when I walk down into the club now, on the odd occasion for a game, it's a special feeling because you're a part of history. Yeah.
No, that's awesome to hear. And so when that first game came along, I think there's for a lot of the Cats fans watching and listening, there may not be. It might be one of those little pieces of trivia that we can kind of delve back into. Everyone knows you for the number 26 on your back, but that's not where it all started. Rolling out there with the number 53, if I'm right.
That's correct, 53.
It's a number that we don't tend to see too much these days.
No, I don't see many of those. There was, I think Ronnie Watt wore 53 before me. So my first game was 53. I'm not sure exactly how long I played in it for. Changed over 26, maybe a year or two, maybe a year later. I'm not quite sure about that. But yeah, 53. When you I don't watch many old videos, but when you do see a highlight of me playing in the first or second game, number 53, I can't recognise myself. Obviously it's a long time ago.
The association is there with 26.
Yeah, that's right. And 20, again, it's funny how you get attached to a number. We always look at the history. Jack Hawkins, Billy Ryan, 26, and now of course the great Tommy Hawkins. You follow that. I do anyway. You follow the person who wears your number closer than other players.
That's fair.
I'm sure all the players are the same.
No, you hear those sort of stories, especially focusing kind of on the Cats side of things. You talk to players, ex-players who maybe still, or you hear from them that are in the media these days. You hear about Lingy, for example, and there's a lot of commentary about him and Brad Close, and you hear similar sort of stories all over the place about those that are kind of Andrew Mackie, for example, and his connection with people who've come through. Gary Ablett obviously was the one that stepped into those boots, briefly after. It's all really fantastic. This kind of there's a bit of theatre to it if you're on the outside. But as you say, there's a deeper meaning for those who've actually been fortunate enough to pull on the hoops and pull on that specific number.
Yeah, it is. And I think the club, again, quite a few years ago now, but it might have been 15 years ago, they introduced, which is not sure if it's still going, but it was great when it was, and it probably still is. But you get it, you'd be invited down to training one day during a year, and you get a letter from the club, from the person who actually wears your number. So, for example, Tom Hawkins invited me down, the club invited me down. We go into the rooms, they have their training brief, of course,
Yep.
before training. And they'll introduce you, and you walk up to the front, and they say a few words about you, then shake your hand, and then watch the training, which is really good because again it gives that extra connection. I suppose back in our day we didn't really do that. You play footy, you recognise history for sure. It was a big thing, but to actually be welcomed down to the club
Celebration is different though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it was really, really well done. And look, I'm sure they do something similar
now. So I guess when you're seeing that, being a part of that brief and then trotting out on the field, obviously the way that training and the way that those briefs would have happened would have been quite different to what you would have experienced under the tenure of Devine, Blight, Ayres, Thompson, etc.
Yeah, very, very different. That's for sure. First, it was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday in the early days after work. So we used to work, well, majority of us, not everyone, but majority of us worked full time. Back in the sort of 80s and 90s. So you get to training at 5:30 and you'd probably get home at 8:30, 9 o'clock.
Yep.
And go to work the following day. And you're right, a lot of circle work, a lot of one-on-one tackling, a lot of running, a lot of competitive work. If you didn't go well on a Saturday, you knew Monday's going to be a really tough day.
You're going to get flogged.
So, yeah, correct. Whereas these days, obviously, it's more the player management, cross-training, quick recovery, all that. I mean, I sort of look at, you mentioned the 4 coaches I've had, and all great footy people and great people. I mean, Blighty, if we had a bad day on a Saturday, Monday was sometimes a practice match, and it was full on.
Yeah.
Bring your mouth guards, and it's 2 hours. So it was sort of certainly different back then. But again, we were really fit. I mean, probably ran too much during the week. But everyone was in the same boat. That was the culture.
And so within that career, obviously lots of highs, a few lows. Obviously, there's some grand final defeats. There's a broken leg along the way as well. But as I kind of highlighted at the beginning there, 241 games, 223 goals. You got the opportunity, obviously, to still play in these grand finals, win, lose or draw. Not many people can say that they obviously got to play in a grand final, let alone as many as you did. There's obviously the big V representation as well, where if I'm putting it quite frank, you dominated a few of those. So
it was good days. It was great. I mean, you're right. It's firstly on the grand final side of final situation. Playing in 4 and losing 4 in 7 years is a bit of taste in your mouth. There's no doubt. Even to this day, you obviously wonder. We just win one. When you see other teams go around and win and celebrate, and their connection they have ongoing for years and years is fantastic.
Yeah.
But we just weren't good enough, and you sort of look back now and you think, gee, it would have been nice just to get one. We were close, one of them. The other 89 we were close. Yeah, 92 were reasonably close. We're ahead at half time, and the other 2 were blown out. And we played in some formidable opponents, to be honest with you. I mean, Hawthorn were a superpower in '89. I think they'd played in 6 or 7 in a row, grand finals.
Yeah.
And the Eagles were, the only state team really. 92 and 4, and Carlton had lost 2 for the year. But massive disappointment. You always wanted to win one, just to sort of come home and say you got a premiership medallion somewhere in your house. But again, you still experienced, nearly the ultimate. You played on a grand final day. You played in front of the biggest crowd at MCG. So we're lucky enough to say, yes, we did play in it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, unlucky to say we didn't win it. But again, it's a great experience.
But obviously before all of that, there was those early days, and we touched on them really briefly as well. As you said, 53 in your back, perhaps didn't even recognise yourself. But do you have any memories of that first kick, that first goal, one of what would become 223 career goals? Do you have any memories of that first day?
Yeah, I do. I say some people, I was 65 metres out against the wind on the left foot.
You got a bit of mayo, right?
But I do recall it. Yeah, I was against Footscray. I played in the half-forward flank. I was brought in to be a bit of a relief ruckman because we had a few injuries at the time, the big boys, Damien Burke and a few of these guys. And although I was tall, I was very, very skinny and not strong. So I played in the half-forward flank, and I do recall the first kick. I had a lot of St Joey's boys, probably about 100 or so in the outer. We actually kicked down northern end, nailed down the northern end, that first goal. That was my first kick in league footy, which was amazing, really, when you look back at it.
Joined the
Got two
club.
for the game. Yeah, got two for the game, and we won the game. And I suppose 86, John Devine, who recently passed, great man, fantastic person, fantastic Geelong man, and a great family, by the way, as well. He gave me the opportunity, and I sort of in and out of the team the first couple of years. I mean, I probably played 3 or 4, got dropped back in after 3 or 4. So it wasn't an easy sort of, I suppose, process to get a consistent game. That was my doing. Just was trying to find my way, and half forward flank, back pocket, bit of ruck here and there, and
trying to work out what suited you best.
Yeah, correct. And it was one of those things. I probably wasn't big enough or strong enough to be a key position at that time. It took me a bit of time to mature into my body.
And so, I mean, at that particular time, and obviously the facilities available to players are so different these days to what you had then. Even highlighted by the fact that it wasn't the full-time thing. You'd go out and you'd have your full-time employment and those sort of things. So the amount of time that you'd have to commit to that was also very different as well. So what did that look like for you at that point, where you are going, okay, I need to do X, Y, Z to bulk up, to get the fitness where it needs to be, etc. What did that look like for you to actually find the time, to carve out the time to be able to do what was required?
Yeah, there were a couple of things, and one was again, I mentioned athletics, and during the summer I'd still do that at Landy Field in those first few years of when I was at Geelong, and that obviously helped my running. That really helped my career as far as a running player went. When Johnny Devine finished up end of '88 and Malcolm Blight took over as coach pre-season, and he'd been in the commentary box in Channel 7 the year before, and he sort of sat all of us down individually and sort of said to me, I can see you've been potentially a key position, you need to fill out. So what I did, I mean, you're right, the fitness centre at the footy club was probably a few dumbbells and a few barbells and a VersaClimber, and that was about it. So I joined the local gym across the road, which I think now the club owns, actually, across the road from Lord of the Isles Tavern. And I did a lot of weights in there outside of my training hours to bulk up. So the 89 pre-season, I sort of put on a few kilograms and just felt more confident in myself. I was probably what age I was, 20, 21, going into the season. And I think over time you feel that anyway, but doing a bit of extra work as far as weights went, and the right stuff as well, not just dumbbell curls, but the right weights, it really helped me, I suppose, fill out, become stronger and maybe a bit more powerful, and have more confidence in what I could do. So that was probably the two things: the running, athletics, and also the local gym. So I can actually really have a confident go at it in '89.
And confidence is obviously a big part of it. So when did you start to feel like, okay, like I'm starting to make this position my own? And I don't think there's ever such a level of confidence, like it's mine, that's it, no one can take it off me. But like that you felt like you really belonged at the level.
Yeah, good question. It took me a while for that year. And again, I go back to Malcolm Blight, and he gave me the confidence to actually that it could be mine. With footy, if you played at 1 or 2 poor games, you get dropped back in those days.
Yep.
And probably still now. But
it just looks a bit different.
He sat down with me one time and sort of said, I'll give you the next 8 or 10 weeks. If you play poorly, obviously I don't want you to play poorly, but if you do play poorly, we won't drop you. So you have the confidence to actually keep improving and keep focusing on the position you're going to be playing in.
Work on the craft.
I think after that 8 or 10 week block, and I was starting to play better footy, more consistent, I sort of felt that, this could be mine. And I think the '89, I had a good year, '89. I played all those blocks of games, the MCG during the season, massive scores. And I think as the year went on, I really felt very confident that I can keep this spot for quite a while.
Well, you kicked your first bag there of 5 against Brisbane in that particular year in '89 as well. It was a 22 disposal game as well at that.
Okay,
so
I didn't realise that. But that's good.
Yeah, all credit to Ben. He's been diving through and grabbing some stats for me along the way. But I mean, when you kick that first bag of 5, or that, regardless of whether it was necessary that game, or when you first kind of really clunked a few and got a few goals on the board, I mean, did that feel like, okay, the work's starting to pay off? This is all headed in the right direction?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it really did it. And again, certainly the goals did, but it was more when you said clunking marks and getting in the right spot. It was probably over time, you get in the right position, but don't hold all your marks.
Yeah.
That's a confidence thing. And it was also a timing thing. So I think you watch some players now, younger players who haven't quite got to the mark where people think they should be. But in my mind, bigger, taller guys take more time to develop. And I think if you get in the right spot and
You're
you
halfway
actually got
there.
the one grab, it might drop a few. I think that'll come. And that's what Malcolm told me was just keep persisting, keep getting in the right position, keep launching yourself. Eventually, they'll stick. And again, I think having that person behind you to give you that confidence. And when you do take a few marks, you think, yeah, hang on, he's right. And
The
then
confidence
you go
grows.
even more. Yeah. So it was certainly one of those things where, I think if you get in the right position, you launch it yourself as a centre half forward, that is, you're gaining confidence. And I think after a few good games, you sort of know you've made it in that role.
Yeah, I mean, confidence, and it obviously gets discussed a lot. You hear, this person's playing confident, that sort of thing. Like, it's one of those really hard to measure, hard to quantify things, but
Yeah, it is.
it sticks out like a sore thumb, and you can look then back upon someone's games, a string of games where they were, someone was really hot, and it sticks out really clearly. And then you reflect on that comment, you go, yeah, okay, like you see it, and then you
Yeah.
look back on the footage and go, oh, I see, like, okay, this is what I was doing. And it's an intensity that sometimes you can just bring that you can't really measure, but when you're hot, and you just go, like everything just
Yeah,
happens.
you do. Yeah, and hopefully make the most of it while you're
Well,
hot.
yeah,
You're right. It's hard to measure. I mean, some games, like anything I suppose you do in life, there's some days you go out and you think you're indestructible. You can actually
and you're
you
a
feel
magnet.
great. And you're on top of the world, on top of the grass. Whereas other days you might go out and it's a bit of an effort. And
Yep.
that can be more mentally than anything. But you're right. When you're in the zone and you feel like I'm going to go for every mark and most of it comes off, it's a great feeling. And it is like a lot of things in life. I mean, I'm not a great golfer, but I like playing golf now. And you might have days you go out there and you're in the zone, you hit it beautifully. Next day you go out, you can't hit it. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, it's sport is a very fickle thing like that, really. So,
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Early days, and we've I guess we're trending towards the grand finals again here. But 89, obviously, there's a lot that's been said about it. It is one of the great grand finals, arguably the greatest grand final of all time. In fact, I'd probably argue, well, outside of the result, you'd say it's inarguable.
Tell the
But
result. Yeah, correct.
the net result kind of brings it down a notch or two. What was the, and this was such an early point in your career still, but what was the feeling like for you specifically afterwards? We obviously hear a lot about the club, and I mean, there's so much drama around that particular game, but for you personally, what was it like afterwards? You've experienced your first grand final. It hasn't worked out the way that you had hoped it would.
Yeah. Look, it was obviously shattering, really disappointing. We had two good finals games. The first one was very ordinary. That was our first finals game against Essendon at VFL Park in the qualifying final. We got belted by 80 points. I think most of our players hadn't played in a final. And the next two, Melbourne and Essendon again, we just hit our straps. After the game, 89, look, it was shattering, there's no doubt. It was one of those things we said before about being indestructible. We sort of thought during the year, look, we could do anything on the day.
Yep.
But again, you come up against the old pros, Hawthorn, who were just so mature, so experienced, so physical, and so smart how they went about it. We did a great job when you look back to get that close. To be honest, you sort of think if only we approached it differently in the first quarter and a half,
Yep.
and played a bit smarter, maybe. It's one of those things you might overexert, you get overexcited,
Burn yourself out.
off. Yeah, so it was shattering. I think one lesson you do learn though is at 21 and you lose it. Went back to the footy club, to the City Hall in Geelong, and the streets are full of people cheering us on, and we'd actually lost the game. And good on them for doing it; they were great supporters. But you always thought, oh, we got next year again. I'm 21. Well, this is it.
Yeah, I can go again. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas 1990, we missed the finals. So if you had your time over again in an older head and wiser head, hopefully, you'd sort of think, well, yeah, that was our one chance. And you go back to the drawing board and start again and prepare even harder to try and get back there. Because I think you sort of sometimes think, oh, we'll be back there again shortly. But it's very hard to get in there. So, yeah, it was really shattering for the guys, especially, Gazza got 9 goals and we thought we were a big chance to win it. And again, you look back now, many years later, you think that was probably the one that got away.
Yeah. And obviously, yeah, really, really disappointing result. But for you, and I guess if we look at the year more holistically, it was a fantastic year for you. Second in the Cargie that year, only behind Couchy, who was obviously the Brownlow medalist that year as well.
Yes.
So a fantastic year for yourself. And I mean, given the final result, was that something that you were actually at the time able to sit back and appreciate, or does the net result kind of consume all at that point?
Yeah, I think the net result consumes most of it. At the time, yes, for sure. You're certainly proud of your achievements of the whole season. The grand final was, if you time over again, you prefer to play a better game. I got 2 goals. I didn't have a starring performance. You sort of think if I only had a few more kicks, a couple more goals, I might have won the game. So you always look at that performance over your whole lifetime, really, to think, gee, I could have just worked a bit harder for that extra few minutes or whatever it might have been. So holistically, yeah, really happy with the year. It was great. Played state footy at the MCG. It was my first state game when there was 90-odd thousand against South Australia.
Yes.
Had Lockett, Dunstall, Brereton. Amazing lineup. So it was a great experience for that year. And I think that the hard work paid off. There's no doubt. But I mentioned earlier about the running and the weights outside of normal training hours. That really paid off. So that was a good achievement. But yeah, the net result still burns away. There's no doubt.
It's a fascinating perspective, though. There's no doubt about it. And so you've obviously touched a little bit on 1990 then, and kind of the letdown that followed. Did you? You've kind of touched on kind of the feeling. Okay, like what you were feeling at the time, and okay, we'll be able to just go around and have another crack. And obviously, that's not what eventuated right away. How soon did you was there a feeling amongst the club that through that year that something just wasn't quite right, like we weren't firing the way we needed to?
We had a few injuries too, I think, as well, which doesn't help.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and I just think, I don't know, we just weren't our sort of vibrant attacking self again, because that's what our game was built on in '89 when Blighty came, was attack, which good or bad, that was what we did.
Yeah.
And we were a very good attacking team.
And it paid off well a lot of the time.
It did, correct. Well, I think we probably lost that bit of attacking flair. And it might have been from the result the year before. It's sort of one of those senses in your mind. It might have just been a mental thing sticking around. Or we might have just, like I was, not saying we got ahead of ourselves, but sort of thinking, well, it's going to happen just automatically. And then
that's it.
When you start the season thinking that, and it might be just one of those feelings, it's just one of those things you think, it's just in the back of your mind. Yeah, we'll be right. And all of a sudden, round 6, 7, and 8, and you had a few losses, you're behind the 8 ball. So I think it was just one of those things, a bit of a hangover from the year before, potentially. One of those things. And a few injuries didn't help along the way. But, we got back up there again 91 onwards. But so it was still a pretty competitive team.
And we won't lose sight of the fact that in 1990, yes, the team performance wasn't quite where it needed to be, but won Kaji that year ahead of perennial winner Buddha. So
yeah. That was good. Actually, I was saying it to someone the other day. Actually, when Johnny Devine passed, I wasn't there when I won the best and fairest because again, back in those days, there was no big event.
Yeah,
at the social club, and we'd stand at the bar and just have listened to the count. I was over at Johnny Devine's pub, the Black Buffalo in Hobart, doing a sportsman's night.
Oh, you couldn't have been much further away if you tried.
Yeah, I got a call from my father saying you won the best and fairest. So it would have been nice to be there, having only won one. But again, that was the time it was. But look, it was a good year for me personally. But again, just missing the finals, that hurt pretty much.
And so you did touch on, obviously, the following year, kind of the rebound, and 1991 onwards, there was a much stronger overall performance from that point onwards. But I think a few people touch on the grand final appearance years. But years like 91, 93, 97 even as well, I think they kind of get lost a little bit by a few people because the appearance in the big dance wasn't there, that the club performed exceedingly well again in those years too. How do you reflect upon those non-grand final appearance years?
Yeah, I think what I said before about 89, the year that got away, I think there's a couple more actually, which weren't grand final years. 91, you're right. We got knocked out in the prelim.
Yes.
I think it was Geelong St Kilda played at Waverley, and we were number 1 and 2, I think, for that year. And we beat St Kilda, and then Hawthorn beat us the following semi-final. And we played the Eagles at Waverley in 91. And we were a better team. We should have gone to the grand final that year, in my belief.
Yeah.
We were in really cherry-ripe form. It was no excuses at all. It was a wet, drib day at Waverley. Blighty tried to make a couple of cunning moves at the start of the game instead of sticking to the usual
tried and true.
Yeah, and we just didn't get over the line. And 93, you mentioned. 93 missed the finals. And again, it's probably one of those things where first half of the year we were playing quite defensive. And Blighty, we were the first to admit this. We sort of went back to a defensive mode of playing, which didn't suit our attacking game. So during the year, we sat down with Blighty, a few of the leaders of the club, and sort of said, let's get back to what we know. Let's play attacking football.
The old KISS model, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, that's where we've been successful to an extent. So we decided, he said, let's go for it. So it was a great 6 or 7 weeks, but it was just too late. I think we beat Essendon, not in no particular order, Essendon, St Kilda, North Melbourne, Collingwood, Eagles in Perth.
Yeah, all the teams that were right up there.
They were all, and I think Essendon won that year. We beat them in Geelong, we beat Hawthorn, and we just played some awesome footy.
But the just left to run too late.
Yeah, we did. And we relied on Collingwood to beat Adelaide in Adelaide on the Sunday, and they were half-time, they were up by 8 goals, and they got beaten. So we missed the finals. But those years are the
Sounds
ones
like a Collingwood effort.
That's right. They do get forgotten a bit where we really should have been better than where we were.
Yeah. Now, along the way, and obviously we've touched on some grand finals, we've touched on some other near misses through some of those other seasons too, but there's a certain game in 1992 that gets discussed quite a lot too, a 239-point game there. What do you reflect upon when it comes to that particular day? Because it was a big one.
It was a big one. Yeah, it's still a record score, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
we got a world
2011
record.
We came close.
Yeah, we did. Yeah,
against the D's that day, but yeah.
Look, they were depleted. Obviously, Brisbane. They had a lot of people.
It was a bad time for the club. Yeah,
they weren't strong anyway. I think they're real strife. They also had lost players for that week, and also on the morning of the game, I believe. I can't remember who it was. But some really big names, and it was unbelievable. Carrara. They had little tin sheds for our change rooms. Pellerman's barn at the back for a few beers afterwards, and I think Gazza got 9 goals, maybe from a wing or half forward flank.
And Bill still has a bit to say about that particular day too.
Bill still talks about himself as he does. I mean, Paul Brown got 6 goals. It was just one of those things where, it was, although it was really enjoyable on the day and night, it was fantastic. You're only young and you play that sort of level of footy.
It's a party day, really.
Yeah, you did, yeah. But that year, though, we did have a lot of big wins, a lot of margins over, a lot of scores over 200 points. So it was a really successful attacking brand of footy.
Yeah, it kind of feels a bit crazy that at any point, Blighty or just anyone kind of thought, hey, let's deviate from this model, because you look at those score lines and the net result too, and you go, doesn't seem to add up.
I think maybe when you sort of think back, you think, well, okay, we lost 89, lost 91 prelim, lost 92 grand final.
Do we need to change something?
93 comes around, you think, I better try and change, be more defensive, and it didn't work. So back to the attacking side.
And obviously, got you pretty close again, a couple of times again. Yeah. But so as we continue to move from there, I guess you were talking about the full-time work and those sorts of things before, and yes. I guess it should be noted that you were forming your own business along the way. There, we got Cabaz's, for example. You were becoming known for your work off the field just as much as your work on the field.
Yeah, they were good days, Cabaz's days. That would have been certainly 30 years ago, if not more.
Yeah,
down in Pakenham Street, Geelong West. It was a bit of fun. Lasted for 2 or 3 years, which is surprising. But it was like a daytime trade. It was good. It was a very, very small little establishment, but it was really good fun. And again, those days when you're 23, 24, whatever the age might have been, you work there for a few hours a day, go to training. They were pretty good. And then got involved in a business with Billy for 6 months, restaurant/cafe, which didn't last that.
Bill would never have been seen though, right?
We were there during the day. We probably shouldn't have been, to be honest, but that's what cost us the business. We really shouldn't have gone, but it was good fun. But again, it was probably wasn't my forte, the hospitality business, after all, in hindsight.
And just for anyone who's watching and listening and hasn't made the connection, Cabaz's Kebabs, that's
right, correct. Yeah, it used to be in Pakenham Street. It was awesome. It was good fun.
So I guess as we continue to creep forward through the career a little bit here, there's 1994, which wasn't necessarily the best year in your career, with a broken leg. What goes through your head in that moment when such a severe injury occurs?
Yeah, well, certainly it was a bit of despair at the time. It was the ankle and leg, I hit a couple of snaps, and I think it might have been round 20. I was pretty close to the finals, and we were playing good footy that '94. So Optus Oval, whatever it was called, it might have been up Princess Park actually.
Yep.
Centre
Yeah. Let me
bounce,
check
went
out.
up, got in the ruck, came down, and went bang bang. So yeah, look, it was one of those things. I remember seeing footage of being carried off on a stretcher. Last year I saw it, and the mind goes back to that time. You think, oh, my year's gone, not knowing it'll be out for probably a year and a half because
knocked out the 94 and 95.
And yeah, it did. Yeah, a year and a half and whole '95 season. But it was sort of one of those things where it was, really disappointing. Obviously, you're going to miss the finals. But I thought you'd be back by round one, '95, but it didn't happen due to complications, due to infections. And done a couple of operations to try and get it right. Bone graft from a hip to try and fix the infected area. So there's a lot of I suppose frustrations back in those days. And I think back there, you look now, if it happened in these days, the support around you as far as welfare, medical is the best you can get.
Yeah.
And this is nothing against people who were there in '95 or '94, but it is 30 years ago.
Well, it's the facilities, it's the finances, it's a combination of all these different sort of things, and the even more professional nature of the game today versus what it was back then. Like these sorts of things,
Right.
it all makes sense at the end of the day.
And I just started a new job at Valvoline Oil Company actually in 1994. We broke the leg and ankle, and had to try and get around on the crutches. And again, it probably wasn't. When you're 20, what was I, 26, and probably at my height of my career. I was probably had a few good years playing good footy. I was vice captain, and and probably didn't deal with it as well as I probably should have. In hindsight, you sort of, you looked after it, but not as well as you probably should have at times. I think because of complications, I thought I was right. Get to the close to recovery, and then all of a sudden you get knocked back down again.
Yeah.
That was hard to cope with.
Oh, I bet.
And I think these days you'd have those mental psychologists and coaches for your mental well-being more than anything. Back then we didn't really have that, and I think it's sort of something was missing in those days.
Yeah, it's that those support mechanisms that. I mean, I'm not going to say they're taken for granted these days, but they're kind of expected. Like you've got those resources there, and
as they should be too, by the way, because it's a professional outfit. But again, back in those days, it was just one of those things when you're a 26-year-old male or female at the height of your career in sport, and you come down with a crippling injury, you got to deal with it in the right way. And sometimes, you might not have done recovery properly, and because you're a bit angry.
You need the support sometimes to be able to approach it the right way. Sometimes, like it's you think you know what's best for yourself in these cases, but sometimes there's an expert that's absolutely in the better position to be able to give you the guidance or support that you need. And
absolutely,
if the facilities aren't there, then that obviously has a big impact.
Well, we got there eventually. I was sick of water running. We did a lot of hydrotherapy
Pool work,
with the harness around my waist in a deep pool for 6 or 8 months. So I got sick of that, but I was still involved with the club, which was great. They were great to me to support me, and came back. So it was a tough year and a half, but and to watch them in 2 grand finals was really tough because I couldn't contribute.
Yeah, what is it like sitting on the sidelines through those days? Can you watch? Could you just not bring yourself to look at the game at all, regardless of what the result was going to be? Or
I certainly watched. I was there. I wasn't a good watcher. Even these days I'm a bit more relaxed. But
few players are there really.
That's
when
right.
they're still on the list, few players are good watchers.
Correct. And I was captain in '95 and hadn't played a game. So to be a captain without playing and watching the grand final, you feel a bit of guilt about it, to be honest, because you couldn't help the teammates. And it wasn't. We couldn't control it. But it's one of those things where to watch the game and 2 grand finals in particular and losing ones in big margins was really tough to deal with.
And so you touched on the captaincy there, which was kind of going to be my next point anyway, so beautifully done there. Yes, you didn't necessarily know that 95 was going to be derailed like it was, but the moment that you I guess got the tap on the shoulder, like how did the conclusion get made that you were the right fit for the captain's gig?
Well, from what I recall, Buddha was nominated sole captain in '95. And then he stood down after a few weeks. He wanted to concentrate on his footy, wasn't ready for it, and it was a courageous decision to do that. And then they sort of trying to work out who would do it. And because I was vice captain in '94 to Mark, excuse me, Mark Bestow was captain.
Yeah.
I think it was a natural progression if I was fit that one day I might be captain. That was the way it was going. So to be out, and then Gary Ablett, Kenny Hinkley, and myself were co-captains. They were playing on the ground, and I was hopefully coming back during the year. That was the plan, was to come back during the season.
Yes.
We weren't to know we were going to miss the whole year again. So it was one of those things that again, club stuck by me. I didn't get on the field, but the following year I was a captain still for 2 or 3 years after. So which was great.
Yeah, through '98. Yeah.
Through the '98, and I was going again. I sort of said to someone a while back that one regret you do have, obviously losing grand finals is one, is when you are a captain of the footy club and you're not at your best as a player. It would have been great to be captain at your peak, so you can influence games a bit more.
Yes.
I think when I did play, my game changed after injury. There's no secret about that.
That's not necessarily surprising for a lot of people who have such severe injuries as well.
Yeah, correct. And I think with that too, when you're out for such a long period of time, I had a lot more injuries afterwards because the wear and tear, I wasn't used to the training. And I had 2 groin operations. I snapped my Achilles, had a shoulder when I came back in those 3 or 4 years because the body wasn't up to the rigours of it. So, yeah, one of those regrets I do have is it would have been great to play as a captain of your own football club when you were playing at your best football level and influence a game, help your teammates, which I still did, obviously help my teammates. But
more of that off-field capacity at the time.
Yeah, but also when I came back, I mean, my standard of the game wasn't where it was in '92, 3, 4, or 1, whatever, etc. But I still had a contribution to make, but wasn't at my best.
Yeah, which is obviously a bit of a shame, but at the same time, it's an incredible honour to be able to lead / co-lead the Cats. So I assume still something you look back upon incredibly fondly.
Oh, most definitely. I'm not regretting it as being a captain. That's for sure. It was fantastic, and to actually, in the histories of the footy club, to say you're captain for 4 years, it's a massive privilege. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, such a small number of people actually get to become a captain of their club anyway, let alone do it for multiple years.
Absolutely. And when I said I regret about not playing at my best when I was a captain, but it was more or less no regrets being the captain. It was wonderful. And to look back at it now, as I said, Billy Brown and I, we see the pivots in Geelong at the footy club.
Yep.
Match day, and in the captain's room, you walk in and there's a big caricature of all the captains, and you think, well, yeah, wow, it reminds you that you used to play at the footy club. So it's great to have that on your CV, and it's something you can never be taken away from it.
And so again, we kind of spoke about seasons that maybe don't get acknowledged in terms of the Cats' performance. Seasons that don't necessarily get acknowledged quite like they perhaps should. And we touched on '97 before. That's another one of those years that obviously right up there, and kind of a painful semi-final loss against the Crows there. What do you make of that particular day? There's a disputed Lee Colbert mark there in the fourth quarter. There's a few what ifs around that. But what do you make of that day?
Yeah, that was really disappointing. It was, you're right, the Lee Colbert mark it certainly wasn't a mark, wasn't it? It wasn't not a mark. It was clearly a mark. I think we go back a week probably when I think we finished on top.
Yep.
And we played North Melbourne on a Sunday night at the MCG, which was their home. They played at MCG every second week. It was a wet night, Sunday. Wayne Carey got 6 or 8 goals out of 10. And we lost that game, went to Adelaide. So we finished on top, played north of their home ground, went to Adelaide to play in Adelaide, and then Colby wasn't paid the mark. That was, again, a missed opportunity. I mean, we were the best team, I think, in that. Really disappointing. It was a long trip back in '97 from Adelaide on the following day. And it was really tough to come back from that in '98. But we did eventually, but it was a tough game. It was a really tough result.
And so as we're getting closer and closer to kind of the end of your playing career at that particular stage. But as we got closer to that end point and the goals are still racking up, you've crossed 200, the 200 game milestone's been crossed. What did those moments mean to you as they were kind of being notched up?
Oh, look, it was everything, to be honest. I mean, again, you look back at the milestones and you sort of, firstly, to be a one club player to me was really important. I mean, like any player, I suppose, opportunities to go elsewhere, which we were over my career.
Yep.
And there was actually even my last opportunity was to go to Carlton in year 2000, and I
Yeah,
was
right.
spent. There's no doubt about that. I mean, my body was gone.
Did you consider it for a
Bombing
second though?
What's it?
Did you?
I did because firstly, I wasn't sure if the club Geelong sort of wanted me to stay on,
Yeah,
and look, you look back now, you think it's probably a fair thought because it's 99. My body was more or less just about gone. But Bomber Thompson came in and wanted me to stay for that extra year, which was great. So there was consideration. I remember meeting David Parkin in Richmond Cafe for a chat. But I'm so glad, and if nothing against Carlton, but so glad I stayed that one club player, especially when I've been a born Geelong person.
yeah,
It's really special, and to notch 200 games, to be a captain as an achievement is something which is fantastic to have. So to have those milestones, but I think the one club player to me is
the
most
greatest part.
important. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I totally respect that, and especially when we kind of compare the era then to the current day, where it feels like there's feels. I mean, you see some players that are on their fourth, their fifth clubs. You see this kind of movement just across the other side of town, let alone some of the interstate stuff. It's happening more and more often these days.
Yeah, it is.
And so
That's the industry too, isn't it?
yeah. And obviously, huge point of discussion, I'm sure, over the coming years, because there is that. I guess some kind of dub it as a very old school sort of thing, but I mean, I certainly appreciate exactly what you and many others have done, which is remain committed to a club the whole time. Now, obviously, the club has a say in these sorts of things too, and
Yes.
I guess we can kind of use a case like a Brodie Grundy as a recent example of someone who didn't really want to leave, wanted to stay at Collingwood, but there were other factors in there that ultimately got him pushed out the door. But in this day and age, it happens less and less often. So to be able to achieve that yourself and see, I feel like maybe the Geelong factor has a little bit to do with it, but to see so many players even these days still remain one club at Geelong. We see obviously Joel Sell, we see Tom Hawkins, but there's lots of other players that have come through, Jimmy Bartell, that all did the same thing. They played their entire careers with the Cats, and maybe our ratio might be a bit higher than some other clubs, I feel like.
Yeah, possibly, and you're right. But people you mentioned there, and we're the lucky ones. I mean, the industry is different these days, as you're saying. And Brodie Grundy is a great example you mentioned. He wanted to stay at Collingwood, and a lot of players do want to stay at their clubs, but because it's such a cutthroat industry these days, more than ever,
it's business more so.
Might have that opportunity. I think I was lucky. The club actually kept me there, so I could have easily been booted out and there was no trade back then, but certainly finished up. But it's certainly one of those things where it's great to have, but you got to be lucky. You have to be at the right time, the right place.
Yeah, there's certainly more of a business flair to things these days, obviously, which can kind of suck that emotional, romantic component of being a one club player out of things sometimes, which is a shame. And I hope that the AFL and the clubs themselves can do more to ensure that one club player approach can still be nurtured and supported. Obviously, there'll be some players that still want to move for whatever reason. There'll be moves that clubs need to make for whatever reason. But if we can try and preserve that in the same way that we've tried to preserve things like the father-son, I think that'll be really, really important for the game going forward.
Yeah, and you're right. And some players want to leave, which is fair enough, for an opportunity. They might be getting a few games at their club, but think they can go somewhere else for the full season, which is fair enough.
Yeah, it happens, and you get others like Danger, for example, that move back to town. And I mean, I don't think there's any Cat supporters going to begrudge that move, considering all this contributed since.
That's for sure, absolutely.
We're perfectly happy if they come to the Cats. It's just if they depart, not so.
and we are lucky that way, because not many really have left the last number of years.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. The move has kind of been a little bit more forced for opportunity or whatever the case happens to be. There's not too many outside of Gary Jr. really in the last decade or so that have moved for any other reason than opportunity. I feel like.
Absolutely.
Or the club
and
is
he came back.
and exactly. So it's a really fantastic. I think. I mean, we always hear about the culture of the Cats today, and I'm sure that plays a big part as well. But I think location probably plays a bit of a part as well. In terms of retaining players that were.
Oh no, yeah, it's a great place to be. And so like Jeremy Cameron, for example, he's fishing and surfing and golfing. It's 15 minutes from your own
living his best life.
That's right, and it's a real destination place now.
And so we touched on obviously the premierships and 2007 was obviously a very important moment for the
Yeah.
club, for yourself, for everyone who, past and present, been at the Cats. So what did that moment mean for you? Now we've obviously touched on Billy, and Billy doesn't shy away from the spotlight, and obviously there's lots of footage of him bawling his eyes out on that particular
Yes,
day.
he loves that. Yeah.
But how did it hit you as a former player?
Oh, look, it was fantastic. I know the lead up to that final series and even the grand final, it was, I suppose it was 44-year drought. We had our chances. The media and journalists, some of the people sort of saying, talking to the past players about how would you feel? Would you feel bitter about it? There's no bitterness. It was, I think I said at the start of our chat, when Tim Darcy said, and it still rings in my ears to this day, you're a supporter, you're a player, then you're a supporter. So I'd retired, still involved in the club. I'm just on a corporate sort of level.
Yep.
So to see them win a premiership was amazing. It was fantastic. We all had tears. It was one of those things. When your footy club, you love your footy club when you're playing, and you love it when you don't play it. It's just one of those things. It's part of your family. So to actually see them win was awesome. We celebrated like we'd won it. To be honest, the past players. I mean, we went down on a Sunday. A lot of past players turned up just out of the blue without any even phone calls going on.
Just everyone knew.
Same way. It was just one of those things. It was fantastic because it'd been a long, long time, and so we had our chances, and the way they went about that year was amazing. So, yeah, couldn't have been happier, and to remain to this day as far as last year. I mean, they've had a great era since
absolutely
05, 04 even.
Yeah, I do think as 04 has been kind of that starting point, really. The prelim final that year, obviously some heartbreak the following year, a little downer in 06, and then from that point onwards, it has just been this unbelievable ride. If you're a Cats fan, a Cats player, past or present, it's been an incredible experience. And I certainly remember. Now I don't have the playing history that you did, but I'd been kind of born and bred on the Cats, and I certainly remember I was there in the stands on the day in 2007, and the same deal, the tears, speaking by Grandad who'd played for the Cats, and the emotion that it hit him at the time. It was a really incredible experience, and to have really been able to bask in so much success over the years since is a real privilege, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, no, it's spot on, and I think you're right what you said about like your grandfather playing, and you just look back and think back to your family and all the people who are involved, and commitment people made to go to the footy and get you to the football club, and whether it be a supporter or a player, and all those things wrapped up into a premiership win, it really hits home to you. And again, last year, I mean, certainly 09 and 11 were the same, no doubt. But last year, same thing. Went to the game, sat in the outer. It was an emotional day. You sort of
for sure.
You get a chill up the spine. They win the premiership. Different group of players. Some have been there before, but it's
plenty of us
a special
hadn't.
place. Yeah, correct. It's just one of those things where I think if you win the next 10, you feel the same way.
Look, if the Cats can find a way to win the next 10, that'd be fantastic, please.
Yeah,
it'd be awesome.
I can't see happening that.
Good little period for us, but neither can I. But we can dream, I guess.
That's right.
And so, in that post-career phase, there you formed the Brownless Stoneham club as well. What's that been like? We've obviously been ragging on Billy just a little bit so far, but to be obviously working with your good mate in that capacity is undoubtedly an awesome experience.
Yeah, look, it is, and it's we do muck around as we should with Billy.
You can't not.
That's right. But we started the same year in '86, and very good mates. We MC the Pivots, the Pivotonians, who are a corporate group for the club over quite a number of years, and the WAGs, which is not the female partners, but the We Are Geelong supporters, which is a corporate group in Melbourne. So we've had a lot of involvement, and also the Brownless Stoneham Club. I ran a group called the Biz Cats, which I loved, and hopefully get it going again in the near future in Melbourne. So to have that involvement after you finish playing, again, very lucky because a lot of players leave the club and don't have an involvement, whereas I've still got that small involvement on quite a few match days. And Billy and I, it's good to catch up with him. It's a good way of doing it. A lot of the people involved in these functions, I've sort of known when we were playing. Yeah. And there's such committed people to the footy club. And we'll be there on Friday night at another function, and they'll pack it out. There'll be a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces, but it's a great way to spend your footy. And again, that involvement. So 85, it was my first year at the footy club, and haven't had a year off since, which is quite amazing.
Yeah, it's a really incredible effort, and again shows the nature of the club and what it's like to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So, all credit to you, but also the club.
Yeah, it is. And we say every year, Billy and I, the last few years, surely they're sick of us. I mean, get some young boys through.
Look, maybe Bill. They might get a bit tired of Bill. I mean, how many times are you going to tell the Lack of Band story?
Oh, every time.
You'd be surprised. So there's I think that history obviously is important, but at the same time, it's fantastic to see faces consistently returning, consistently engaging with the club and the supporter base as well. Before we start to wind things down, there was one other little aspect I wanted to touch on back from the playing days. Ben gave me a really handy stat before the show. So we touched on it, 241 games, 223 career goals, 401 frees against. You're a bit of a thug.
Is that right?
In a day and age where the whistle didn't get wheeled out too often, 401 frees against. What do you make of that?
Unlucky, victimised.
Yeah, I think they probably had something against you.
Yeah, look, I must admit, I was a bit of a hothead back in those days, playing footy. And again, I was a centre-half forward. You have to have a bit of a hothead, I think, because you have blokes hanging off you, coming from behind, getting belted in the back of the head.
You weren't getting protected quite as much as you are these days.
No, and I probably stepped over the line a few times. I didn't know it was that many, to be honest with you, but all I know is Brownlow votes weren't a thing for me. I think I got about 21 in my career, over 15 years. So it probably is a compelling point when the free kicks are against me, 401. That's a significant amount of free kicks against.
Look, I mean, I guess at face value, it's only 2 a game. I don't know. We can kind of dial it back that way. You might have had 2. It might have been breaking even on average. Who knows?
When you think back, you did some silly things, and I remember coaches looking at me, shaking their head, going, "What are you doing?" I said, "Sorry, just lost my cool a bit." I think it's that competitive nature, but I didn't realise that was that high stat.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thanks very much.
So, as I said, we'll start to wind things down. Firstly, obviously, massive appreciation for you and everything you've achieved in the career up to this point on the field, off the field. But as we start to kind of summarise and look at a few bigger picture aspects that aren't necessarily you specific, who in your eyes is the greatest cat of all time? And that could be someone you've played with or been able to watch on over the years.
Yeah, look, I've always said Gary Ablett Senior because I played with him for 10 years, and what he could do in a footy field hasn't been, I don't think, got close to. He had everything going for him. He
Box office.
Jump, run, both feet, 60 metres, take towering marks. He could fight, all that. So I think he's always been number one for me. Having said that, I mean, Joel Selwood, he's up there really close. I mean, there's so many other players you could mention, and Gary Ablett Jr., Matty Scarlett, etc., etc. And I didn't see Polly Farmer, but obviously he was one of the greats ever.
Yes.
But you sort of look at Joel Selwood and just complete admiration for what he's done for the footy club on field, for sure. Great player, superstar player, and around the club. So he's up there with the best of them, no doubt. But I think just as far as talent goes, Gary Senior wins it for me. You'd ask a lot about who was better, Carey or Ablett, and Carey won 2 flags. Doesn't mean he's a better player. Carey was amazing, more consistent, and an absolute awesome player. But Gazza on his day, you couldn't compare anyone to him. I thought he was just amazing.
No, absolutely. I totally understand that one. Which leads well into the next question. Now, best player versus necessarily most valuable to the team can be a totally different sort of thing here. So it's schoolyard pick style draft thing for you, and you got Gary Jr. and Gary Senior standing side by side. Which way are you going to
go? You pick both?
Sorry, I'll take the other one.
That's a tough one. It's who would I take? I'd probably take probably Senior, because I don't know. I mean, both won games for Geelong how many times? Mercurial things and best and fairest. And that's a really tough question. And I said I was sitting on the fence a bit, but I said Gary Senior was the number one for me, so I'd pick him.
No, and that's totally fair as well. I mean, I don't want to diminish Gary Jr.'s efforts because obviously he's exceptional, and also I'd like to get him on the show one day, so I definitely want to upset him. But what Senior was able to achieve as a full forward, and it's that kind of nature of the positions I think that plays a big part in it as well. Is like there's not that many full forwards of that caliber,
Yep. Oh yeah.
there are more midfielders that are in that same conversation as Gary. Not necessarily as good, but
Yep.
there is a larger number in that thing there. So if you're going the whole schoolyard pick style, you pick senior and you go, well, there's a lot of good midfielders still here left. I'll grab
Oh yeah.
whoever after that. So
he started playing a full forward late in his career, and he got 1,000 goals.
Yeah,
So
it gets lost sight of too.
Yeah.
And so, looking at kind of the more modern day side of things, we've obviously just touched on Joel. You've got Hawk that's playing in your old number 26. Of the current crop, is there anyone that I don't know? Maybe outside of Hawk, and maybe it's just the number thing that you've got that little extra closer eye on. Just that little bit of extra love.
Bit of extra love. Yeah, good question. Certainly Hawk. And again, amazing career, really amazing career for Hawk.
Yeah, can you believe that number of games? It's exceptional at this point.
Yeah, it is.
We obviously made a big fuss about Joel last year in the record game holder, but I wouldn't rule out Hawk overtaking him at this particular point.
No, he's had a great year last year.
Yeah.
He's getting better with age, I think. So, yeah, look, he's certainly one of them. I think Tom Stewart, I don't know Tom well, to be honest. I've met him 2 or 3 times just at a function. But just the way he carries himself and how he's come about being a footballer, starting at a mature age. So you watch him closely, but he's missed consistency. He's a fantastic player. Yeah. And even a couple of younger ones, Tommy Atkins. And,
yes.
And, I'm just like watching Mark O'Connor, just because it's an Irish story. Lovely young fellow. I think there's a few stories that really have caught my eye a bit over time. Yeah. But I think number 1's Tommy Hawkins, and then number 2 is Tommy Stewart.
No, that's fair. A couple of fantastic choices there, and looking at the next generation of Cats, we're obviously seeing some younger players come through. We see the Max Holmeses and the like that are starting to kind of flourish in the team at the moment, or starting to push hard through the seconds. Is there anyone in particular that seems to have caught your eye, or that you've got a slightly closer eye on? You think, okay, that bloke might be one of our next big guns, and that's not to diminish again anyone else who's on the way through as well. But
no, sure. I think you mentioned Max Holmes. He was so unlucky last year.
Yeah,
during the year he had a fantastic year last year.
Top ranked wingman in the comp for the back half of the season.
And just the way his pace and his run, he carried the ball and he had that confidence about him. He was superb.
Well beyond his years.
One player who was a bit sort of under the microscope for a while was Zach Guthrie. I remember starting of last year, said a couple of guys, I thought he'd have a good year last year, which he did. He came through. He's really matured as a young player as well.
Well, exceptional in the period where you mentioned Tom Stewart before, but when Tom Stewart stepped away, it felt like Tom Stewart was out there the whole time because Zach Guthrie really played that role exceptionally. And now there's 2 of them that opposition have got to contend with. So,
and Brad Close. I mean, he's still young, but he seems so composed in his role.
Yeah.
And again, and consistent. So not a hard role. Sorry, it is a hard role to play where he plays, half forward, flank forward, pocket.
Absolutely.
Most of the time. Can be a graveyard. He does his role to the nth degree all the time. So he's a really good player.
Anyone from that really young crop that's only just kind of come through that you've got an eye on? Just think that
I need to look at him a bit closer.
That's fair.
Yes.
We'll play it safe and we'll go with Jai Clark as our first round pick. That's a nice.
Well, he's a Queenscliff boy, that's for sure. And I know his father's still not well, but Steve Clark, and we're Melbourne, but also in Port Lonsdale. So Jai Clark's certainly one. I haven't seen much of him play, but there's big reps on him. So I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it as well. So awaiting that debut whenever it comes along.
Absolutely.
As of the time that we record this, and I guess I'm dating the show a little bit for those watching and listening,
sure.
We're recording a little bit of a vacuum here. This is pre-round 1 at this particular point in time. So who knows? We could be totally wrong with everything that's come with these comments.
Right,
but
exactly
how are you feeling about the 2023 season? We're obviously coming off the back of a premiership, which typically leaves you in a pretty good position going into the following year, but you never know. Hangovers can happen. How are you feeling about the Cats and the pursuit of a premiership in 2023?
Yeah, I'm still pretty buoyant about it. I think obviously a lot of work to be done. You're still a start again. Everyone's chasing you, and you're the ones who everyone wants to bring down.
Yep.
Obviously, Joel going a big loss for the whole reason we've mentioned before. But they've recruited well. I mean, mentioned Jai Clark, for example. I mean, Ollie Henry, I think, is going to be a really good player.
Yes.
Sort of Collingwood at the start of last season, the early games, he in the forward line, like a real spring-heeled player, looked really exciting. I think he'd be an excellent player for us.
He made a mockery of us 1 or 2 times throughout a couple of those games too. to his great
Yeah, he
credit.
did. So he's exciting. Tanner Bruin,
Yep.
a good Geelong boy, of course. So they recruited really well for the team. And I think some of the players we've mentioned already, who might be, I'm not sure the exact age, might be 23, 24 or 22 even.
Yep.
There's a batch of those guys coming through. And I think they'll be better again for the year. So, and they'll be still hungry. Paddy Dangerfield, the captain, he's got a couple more years at least left in him. It's just the man, Jeremy Cameron, who's at the height of his career. I think they're in a really good place to go really well again. But I'm sure it's very difficult. You've won a flag, you've been to the height, you've got that taste for it. It really depends, in my mind, like any club, or most of them, is injuries and who stays fit. But the way Geelong manage their players is very good. So I think they'll be up there. I mean, there'll be a few contenders, but I think the club will be in a really good spot come the end of the season. You'd think certainly top 4.
You'd like to
and
think so,
from
yeah.
there on, who knows from there?
Who do you, I mean, as the outside observer, I guess both of us are, taking a look at some of those competing teams. Who's the one that you think, if not the Cats, this is the one that is potentially the front runner?
I think Melbourne will be back up there again.
Yeah.
I mean, they went out straight sets last year. They're a
strange second half of the year for them.
Yeah, they're good outfit, great midfield, a bit deeper this year as well. Brody Grundy, unknown quantity as far as him and Max, but it's going to be pretty big for them. They've got a great back line. So I think they'll be right up there. I think Collingwood again. I mean, their year.
Yep.
Hard to repeat last year for Collingwood. I mean, they had that many close wins. But again,
it could really go either way.
Yeah, it could. They just they've got that confidence about them. They just really take it on. It's an exciting brand of footy.
Yep.
I think the Pies. Richmond, Hopper, Taranto. Really depends on how their senior players go with Dusty and Koch and
Rewald. Yeah. Grimes.
And how Lynch stays fit. But I think they'll be up there again. But I think Melbourne would be the real contender for mine.
That's fair.
Sydney we heard from last year, but they've still got a very good young batch of players.
Yeah, I'm with you. Melbourne's the one that I'm kind of them and actually the Tigers, and again that's on the proviso that they kind of stay fit. They're the two teams I think for me that are the ones that concern me the most, and that's not to diminish anyone else because anyone on their day could bob up. We've seen it happen before, but they seem to be the more obvious candidates, I guess, at this point in time.
Absolutely, I'm with you there. So it'll be interesting to see how it all goes, but glad it's back on.
Oh yeah, it's going to be awesome to get to see the Cats and the Pies this Thursday night again as we record. Sorry, this Friday night I should say. As we record in this vacuum, but I'm really excited for it. So
absolutely,
I hope all the Cats fans watching and listening are too. Barry, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this journey so far. It was incredible to get to chat to you. Certainly seeing you on the field is amongst my first kind of memories of footy when I was the first distinct memory I have of watching the footy was unfortunately the 1995 Premiership Grand Final. But obviously to get to see a lot of footage of you throughout those years as I learnt more about the game at that point, Dad showing me old games, obviously from that point watching a lot more as well. Little 5 and 6 year old Paul, a bit devastated by 95, but then loving so much of what was to come afterwards, and you doing an amazing job for the Cats. So on behalf of myself, all the Cats fans, thank you so much for coming on the show, for being an incredible player for all those years, and really doing an amazing job representing both yourself and the Geelong Footy Club.
Thanks, Paul. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great chat, actually. It's a bit of a memory lane going back, so it's great to actually have a bit of a chat about it, to be honest, and remind me of what happened over the years.
One of my favourite parts of doing this thing. So thank you so much for joining me for it. And Cats fans, if you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to The Hoop Show on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to Behind the Play on podcast feeds. If that is your preferred platform, make sure to, I'll just, get you to slap a 5-star review on it as well, just because it helps with all the algorithms. So please make sure to do that if you're watching and listening. But Barry, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks, Paul. All the best. Go to the Cats. Cats fans, remain Geelong strong. Be one in the hoops, and we'll see you soon.